Okay, so it's high time to start the meeting. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the training session on the European Handbook for Voluntary Local Reviews on the Sustainable Development Goals. My name is Annika Lenz. I work for the Office for Europe and European Institutions for UN Habitat in Brussels, and I will be your moderator today. We have about 1 hour of presentations, followed by half an hour of questions and answers and an open debate. And if there's time, also sharing your experiences with the handbook and with the indicators. So I'm pleased to introduce the first speaker today, Paulius Kulikauskas, who is the Chief of the UN Habitat Office in Brussels. Paulius, you have the floor.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay. Yeah, welcome. I'll join Annika in welcoming you to this training session. This event is a part of the Urban 2030 initiative, which is funded and implemented by Directorate General for Regional and Urban Policy of the European Commission, the Joint Research Center, and UN Habitat. Well, it comes at a little bit difficult times. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I believe most of us are already connecting from home again. And this whole crisis has also brought a very deep fiscal austerity at the United Nations, and we have our Executive Board of UN Habitat congregated as we speak, among other issues, trying to figure out what to do with the fiscal restraint. There is a good part of this time because for United Nations, October is urban. So we had World Habitat Day on the first Monday after first weekend in October. We will also have a celebration of the World Cities Day on the 31st of October. This Saturday it will be in Kisumu, Nakuru, Nairobi in Kenya. This year's theme is valuing our communities, and we will also launch our World Cities Report, which this time is trying to uncover the value of sustainable urbanization. So this is the context of voluntary local reviews, which we at United Nations see as an extremely useful monitoring tool for sustainable development goals and other goals that cities may have. And in that sense, the European Handbook for SDGs, Voluntary Local Review, is an extremely useful tool which we believe can be used well beyond the borders of Europe. So I don't want to go into details. There will be other speakers and presentations. Just speaking on behalf of the United Nations, I would like to remind that voluntary local review, in addition to being a monitoring tool for a local authority, is also a great dimension of monitoring the multi-level governance. Because I think it is very useful not only focus on one jurisdiction, but to see how all the subnational authorities and what they're doing for sustainable development goals are contributing or working within a national and multinational framework. So as you know, our statutory mechanism at the United Nations are voluntary national reviews and implementation of SDGs. And in addition to more and more voluntary local reviews being presented in one way or another at the high-level political forum in New York every summer, we believe that they should also be better reflected in the voluntary national reviews so that the full multi-level governance monitoring is coherently represented. I don't want to take more time on this, so if you permit me, I would like to pass the floor. There is someone who has microphone. There's a lot of noise in the background. And with this noise, I pass the floor to welcome address for Mr. Mikkel de Basso, who is a director for growth and innovation at the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission. Thank you, and the floor is yours, Mikkel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paulius. I have three remarks before I start. The first one is we are delighted to join forces with you, you in Habitat, Paulius, your team, and also the colleagues in the EU region. And I hope this is the beginning of a long-term relationship because there is a lot of work to be done here. And this is one of the objectives of this meeting. Yes, it is training, but it's also to make people aware of the importance of what we are about to be talking about. And I will try to explain why. But the second thing I want to say is, Alice and Paola, thank you so much for organizing this, for all the work you've done, for the rest of the team also, but for you too, because you have a lot of work in front of you. And this is so important because this is a unique handbook, and I'll try to prove this to you, okay? And thirdly, welcome. Welcome everybody. I've seen a number of old friends here from cities that have a fundamental role to play in promoting this handbook, but most importantly, in strengthening our commitment to sustainable development goals. Because when we talk about sustainable development goals, people forget about an essential question. How well are we doing? You know, the handbook is about the cities and measuring that. But if I look at the monitoring that the European Commission has recently done on sustainable development goals, and people tend to forget, you know, there is a lot of hype about the twin transition, green, digital. We are at the heart of it in Seville, in the Joint Research Center, how to go about that. But then you read it, and then you read things like this. And please stick to me just for a few seconds. It says literally, the EU thus seems no longer on track to meet their respective 2020 targets for primary and final energy consumption. In addition, although the EU is on track to meet its 2020 greenhouse gas emissions target, Europe continues to face an intensifying climate impacts, such as increasing surface temperatures and ocean acidification. Furthermore, biodiversity continued to decline, while soil sealing through artificial and impervious surfaces kept growing. Moreover, R&D intensity and patent applications showing more or less stagnating trends over the past 5 years, and a shift towards more sustainable transport mode is not yet visible. Plus, if I'm not wrong, the ones dealing with equality are not showing great progress. So yes, this is very important. Yes, it's in the speeches of all our politicians, but do we really realize how fast are we going towards this policy roof, overarching goals, SDGs? And we need to measure, and we need to ring the alarm when it is not going well. And this is precisely why the handbook and the effort made with these indicators is so important. The second reason I think is so important is because, you know, there's no way that anybody is going to get to the SDGs as they stand if they are not aware of interdependence, which is obvious in the case of green growth, of sustainability. Sustainability, interdependence, multilateralism, and we have to cry it loud in this situation. We need multilateralism. We need to be aware of interdependence. COVID has made it evident. There is no solution. I don't have a solution if you don't have a solution. My solution depends on yours. We need to deal with this together. We are in this together. And we need this joined up effort. And the SDGs is a unique opportunity to go about it in a rational way, measuring it, monitoring it. Now, cities are essential. You know, in this COVID situation, some citizens are wondering, you know, is it a luxury to be talking about sustainability and the green stuff when I have my job at stake? What do you mean? Is this a priority? Isn't it my health? Is it in the job I am about to lose? Or I don't know where I will be in 6 months? What should be the priority? And I think cities can demonstrate the direct impact on everybody's life linked to the sustainability objectives, the green ideal. From quality of air and health to clean urban transport, to job opportunities, cities are a laboratory where we can expose to the citizens the benefits of going fast towards the SDGs. And they should be the background policy framework for any good, solid local intervention. And this is where we come to these voluntary local reviews. There are many attempts, but we have a handbook and we have a good one, a recent one. February, I think it was Abu Dhabi. It was presented. Since then, 9,000 downloads, and this is the beginning. We need to translate, we need to communicate, we need to replicate this operation that you are doing today in many places, make them aware about this handbook. This is a joined up approach. We need to improve together the framework, the handbook based on the practical experience of the cities that are today on the screen. And they have to be invited to modify and to improve and to take it forward. We can be a global reference. We're starting to be with this handbook. And, you know, this is a starting point for collaboration with cities. We believe the city issue is critically important. We have a whole unit dealing with urban planning. Today, by the way, and in brackets, you will find a revamped website, which is called Reopen EU, done by the same unit as Alice and Paola, that tries to stimulate tourism with a critical role for cities by the European Commission in these times of COVID. Reopen EU, it will become an application soon. And we will be doing a lot of things with cities. 2 weeks ago, our president talked about the new renovation wave. She also talked about the Bauhaus concept within that. Form follows function, but I don't want to get lost. But this is just to profit from this opportunity, having all these cities around the table to tell them we are very serious about this. We'll have a couple of international conferences. Stay tuned. We are lucky to have the mayor of Seville as chair of the Green Deal, really, in the Committee of the Regions, and we'll build on that. And we have friends here from Andalusia and Sevilla that can tell you more afterwards. But now, the emphasis, as I said, is collecting the results of the handbook, on the use of the handbook by the cities, and improve the handbook. This Urban 2030 project, which started in 2018, is a building block, one of them, because we also have methodologies at the regional level to channel public funds, to catalyze private funds of innovation and research to get to some of the sustainable development goals. And we are cooperating with the United Nations on this, on an international project in several countries to test what we call the regional innovation strategies for a smart specialization. Our work with the handbook, our direction towards the SDGs is replicated at regional level with methodologies such as the RIS4, Sustainable Smart Specialization Strategies, that are being progressively more and more used in Europe and outside. In Europe, by the way, every region has to develop one, and we have 40 billion euros behind this methodology, this operation, thanks to the colleagues in DG Regio. I'm going to just shut up because there are more interesting things to be put on the table than what I'm saying. I want to tell you very seriously, if there is one objective today, is to not only to use, but to contribute to the improvement of this handbook as an international reference that help us go swiftly, faster towards the Sustainable Development Goals at local level. And we need to be at the forefront of this race, with the city showing the way to others and using the handbook. So thank you very much, Paulius and Annika.
Thank you very much, Mr. Landabasso, for this passionate introduction. Our next speaker is Mrs. Wallis Gulen, who is a senior advisor at DG Regio. Wallis, I'm glad that you managed to connect, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me, Lisa? I hope so. I cannot hear you anymore.
We can hear you. Sorry, I muted myself
happening?
not to interfere.
You can hear me.
Can see you
Okay,
too.
I just wanted to check. Okay, very good. So I was very impressed, colleagues, by what we just heard from Michael Landabasso. And indeed, he passed on all the very essential messages. And I would have very little to add to what he has just said in terms of strategic positioning of the European Commission vis-à-vis the SDGs. The only point I would dare to add, because I was really impressed by this speech, is that today, even more than ever, we consider that sustainability is becoming absolutely essential when it comes to resilience. Resilience of our countries, resilience of our cities, resilience of our territories in the current circumstances. So something we now goes hand in hand with resilience. This is an important new feature that we did not necessarily had in mind when we started working on the SDGs. Now, on behalf of the Directorate Region, DG Regio, responsible for cohesion and regional policies in the European Commission, I would like to thank you very much for this kind invitation. It is actually a real and personal pleasure to join, and in particular to meet again with my friends from UN Habitat and GRC. We have been collaborating so hard. On the side of my Directorate General, so of DG Regio, we are very glad to have the opportunity to be part of this specific training session, which is targeted to cities and SDGs, as we have been involved as well and all the way through in the preparation for the handbook that we will be discussing today. And I must say that we are very interested to hear how this deliverable that we have been producing could help you, the representative of cities, in the practical implementation of the SDGs at the local level. And this is why I wish to share a few words with you to make the link with cohesion policy in particular, for which I'm responsible for. Indeed, why cohesion policy? Simply because there are fundamental links, I would even dare to say, a very strong correlation between cohesion policy on one hand and the SDGs. Cohesion policy is all about reducing inequalities between the regions and territories of the European Union and maintaining economic, social, and environmental cohesion wherever possible and whenever possible. And in this context, I mean, in the context of our mandate, we are very much aware that cities and regions are actually key for the European Union to deliver on its strategic objectives and as a high priority on the Sustainable Development Goals. And in this respect, at EU level, the support and contribution of cohesion policy and all its investments to the SDGs localization process has been supported very much via these investments, which are targeting many areas of sustainability, as well as through the methods we have put in place to invest at territorial level, that is to say, multi-level governance processes. Indeed, through the territorial and urban dimension of cohesion policy, I should rather say, in the programming period 2014-2020, many SDGs are implemented locally thanks to strategies for sustainable local development, which are triggering public investment which support several policy areas. This is what is at the core of cohesion policy when it comes to the SDGs at the local level. And actually, not less than 115 billion euro coming from the European Regional Development Fund are spent in cities, out of which 17 billion euros are managed directly by the cities themselves. And altogether, there are now a little bit more than 950 integrated urban development strategies, which are being implemented with the EU financial support of the cohesion policy, leveraging further national and regional investments. And for the coming years, those which are still to come, that is to say, under the programming period 2021-2027, cohesion policy will continue even more than ever to enable the European Union to further support the localization of the SDGs, as it remains our foremost investment framework to support regional and local authorities to establish sustainable and resilient development strategies according to the unique needs, according to the potentials, according to the talents. And what is particularly important there is to flag that post-2020 cohesion policy will provide the required strategic, integrated, and place-based approach for the implementation of sustainable development goals to be effective on the ground. This is absolutely essential. For this new round of programming, that is of delivering investments, we have decided at the European Commission level to territorialize the cohesion policy, not only through territorial investment as such, but also through the investments that will be of a thematic nature, corresponding to the EU priorities. But in the context of this overall territorialization of cohesion policy, we will promote in particular integrated territorial solutions covering different sectorial policies and answering the local needs approach by taking into account the very diversity of territorial context. And this is very relevant as well for the SDG framework, as they do not carry the SDGs, they do not carry the same relevance at all levels and in all the member states. Let us spend a few seconds on this new programming period 21-27, under which cohesion policy will be by far the most important investment policy of the European Union, even before now the common agricultural policy and its corresponding investments. For the coming years, as I said, we've decided to territorialize cohesion policy. And in particular, we have proposed a new policy objective, which is PO5, entirely dedicated to integrated sustainable urban and territorial development, simply to follow up on one of our strategic political priority, to get Europe closer to citizens. And in this context, we have set only two minimum requirements for investments being made at local level to comply with the use of this policy objective. On one hand, investments have to be based on integrated and place-based strategies developed by the relevant territorial and local authorities, no one else. And secondly, these same authorities have to be involved in the selection of the operation, that is to say, the selection of the investments that are going to take place. And with this approach, we truly aim at allowing our cities to design their own policy mix of interventions to give appropriate responses to their specific challenges and make the most of their potential. And with the renewed framework that we have proposed, many SDGs will be covered, implemented into the detailed policy objective and specific objectives that we have put in place, and among which the authorities have to choose to establish their own policy mix of measures. For example, it is possible to enhance innovation capacity through PO1, Policy Objective 1, which corresponds to SDG 9. It will be possible to promote energy efficiency measure under Policy Objective 2, which corresponds to SDG 7 and 13. And it will also be possible to reduce inequalities by reinforcing access to education and training under PO4, which correspond to SDG 4. And for all those thematic policy objectives, which corresponds to the priorities of the European Union, that is to say, moving towards a smarter Europe, a greener Europe, a more connected Europe, and a more social Europe, under all these thematic policy objectives, there will be the possibilities to territorialize the corresponding investments through territorial instruments. And on top of that, of course, there will be this famous now 5, which is entirely dedicated and uniquely dedicated to territorial cohesion as such, and in particular at urban level, which itself cover for SDG 11, but not only for SDG 11, for the urban dimension of all the other SDGs, given that under PO5 investments, we will stimulate, we will trigger integrated policy measures and corresponding investments. That is to say that we will be breaking down the policy silos. And this is particularly what is at the core of the handbook that we are presenting today. That is to say that with this handbook, we will be providing a further instruments to cities to help them building up the type of integrated, sustainable resilience strategies, which are the very objective of cohesion policy under its new territorial dimension. Now, all this, we will also, and we have already done so, by the way, we have proposed actually a new European urban initiative which will support cities in a number of ways. It will provide support to innovative actions to develop transferable and scalable innovative solutions to urban challenges. And it will also aim at improving capacities of cities in the very design of sustainable urban policies and practices in an integrated and participative way. And this will go hand in hand with the handbook that we are discussing today. In doing so, we expect to lead to the upgrading of the design and implementation of sustainable urban strategies and action plans in cities. Of course, going further in establishing ambitious objectives for the European Union and its territories, I can only but refer to the European Green Deal, which represents our new European growth strategy. The Green Deal will contribute to supporting the role of urban areas and cities in particular, because this is where things are happening at the moment, in promoting responsible production and consumption, in promoting circular economy, sustainable mobility, nature-based solutions, and their numerous interlinkages, all of which are absolutely essential to fully implement the Green Deal in all its dimensions at the European Union level, and simultaneously to further progress towards the SDGs. And finally, to go back to our main focus today, the handbook, our goal for this project is really to help cities work at their own level, at ground level, to translate the SDGs in their own context through monitoring, through measurement first, as Mr. Landabazo said, through measurement and monitoring in order to identify possible gaps, identify progress areas, and then better inform their policy decisions according to this framework, which means that now the ball is in the camp of our cities. But we know as well that cities do face some serious challenges in localizing the SDGs in terms of capacity and data, notably So we wanted to try to complement other tools available in order to bridge this gap, hence the handbook that we are discussing today. And in this respect, dare to wish you a very good session, a very lively session, so that your takeaways be based on ensuring sustainability and resilience when it comes to the development of your cities. I thank you very much for your interest in this respect, and I remain at your disposal. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Wallis, for this welcoming words and for introducing the handbook already. Our next speaker, whom many of you already know, is Alice from the Joint Research Center, who will introduce the localization of the SDGs and their measurements. And just to show you what the hard copy looks like of the handbook, we received the whole box. Oh no, it's my camera is not. No, I need to change my camera. Just to let you know that the handbook is very thick. It's very nice to read. Over to you, Alice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annika. Can you see my screen, my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yes,
Thank you very much. And I have really to thank the UN Habitat Office in Brussels and the colleagues in DG Regio for helping out to organize this training that has the previous speakers recall are part of a larger effort. I will try to be concise, but also to highlight some of the issues that most of the cities are interested in too. I will start this presentation recalling what we are talking about and what is the localization of SDGs, because there haven't been for a long time a clear definition of what is the localization, but over time in the last 5 years we get to an agreed, let's say, definition. So the localization involves the definition, the implementation, and the monitoring of strategies at local level. In these regards, it's very important that the localization means also to translate the development agenda into local results. So it's very important to make the link not only with all the mechanisms, the tools, the innovation, and the platforms that are involved in this process, but also with the results. Who localize the SDGs? Many actors, not only city, not only local governments, but they do it in cooperation with other stakeholders, of course. I try to systematize a little bit what are the different actions that local governments can take to localize the SDGs, building on the experiences and the material and the research that have been carried out not only by the GRC, but also by other institutions in the last years. There are several steps. I put them in order, but they are not really consequential. They could be made in different steps. A first level of activities is awareness raising that usually involves the city departments, can also address directly politicians, local politicians, and target groups of citizens. There is a second level in which the city map the actions or the area of competence linked to the SDGs. This is much more an endogenous process that local authorities carries out to understand the area competence, the budget, for example, that they use, and involves try to target all the city departments. This is very important to really engage the community of actors internal at the local administration. The third step can be identifying the voluntary local reviews. That was the main object of our research activity and support activity, that of course reinforce the city accountability and the transparency. It also allows cities to be involved in a global movement and in a European movement, and of course offers opportunity for peer-to-peer learning. All of that can lead eventually to a full alignment of the city strategy versus the SDGs. And this is the case of many local authorities that now are using the SDG since the beginning in the definition of the new strategic plans. We have also some colleagues from cities that are into this process. That of course involves all the previous ones, all the previous steps in a way, because you cannot definitely, it would be very tough to align the strategic plan to the SDG if the city departments are not involved, if the politician don't provide a political commitment. So it is a whole process that encompasses these 3 steps. But focusing on the voluntary local review, that actually was one of the main exercises and the first exercise the cities took to engage in the localization. We have to recall that this is really a very difficult. It needs to translate a reporting system of the SDG that has been designed for member states, for countries. Most of you know that there are the 17 goals, the 169 targets, and the indicators that are also periodically under review. So the member states, through their national statistical offices, yearly they report to the UN custodian agency to produce a global report. A similar effort is done also in Europe, and Michael before was recalling the last EU report that use additional and in some cases different indicators. In addition to that, every member state also periodically committed to report to the UN, to the high-level political forum, to the 2030 Agenda High-Level Political Forum. In 2020, 47 countries presented their reports to the high-level political forum. For 26 of them, it was the first time. So, and in this report, it should also be included the subnational level. So what is the inequality within the countries? In some cases, this is represented, in some other less. So when we, in this national reporting, periodical and national reporting, was actually translated by some front-runner cities into the SDG voluntary local reviews. On this map, you see the one, some of the ones that have been already published. Many cities committed to produce VLRs in the next years. So it was definitely an effort of front runners that translate a global system into a local one. But what were the materials that they had at their disposal? Not very much, but fortunately UNDESA last week provided, a couple of weeks ago, provided some official global guiding elements for the VLRs that I will discuss briefly after this. There are, of course, the examples of VLRs already produced and some materials produced by city networks or research centers. Here you see some examples. What was really the challenge was to translate the national system into the local system, but also to use the VLR as a tool for the localization. And this is very important. Most of the city haven't seen the report only as a monitoring tool, but also as a way to engage internally with the administrations, but also with external stakeholders, to identify the gaps, but also to highlight the transformative action that can eventually lead to the achievement of the SDGs. One important element is that developing the statistical capacity, the monitoring engagement is definitely one of the key elements for the success of the achievement of the SDGs. Michael recalled this very wisely before. If we don't know where we are, but especially even if we know where we are, we have to then take informed decision and better step forward. So what we have been doing with the Urban 2030 project, that was a very effective cooperation with DG Regio, UN Habitat, was really trying to support local authorities who were willing to start a VLR with 2 main actions. On the one hand, we technically discussed with experts the development of specific methodology for calculating specific indicators. This has been done with a series of workshops organized with the specific team. And the second one was to produce the handbook, basically. So the handbook is really, as you say, quite a big publication now, but we wanted to have the handbook as a clear guide for the selection, for a method to select the indicators, because we really thought that there was a need to support and to provide examples. The target audience is really European, local and subnational authorities. We focus specifically on indicators. I will briefly explain what is the structure of the handbook. The first part explain what is the voluntary local review and give an overview of the different monitoring system and discuss some of the data challenges. We also include the recurring building blocks of the VLR. In this slide, I summarized the main elements that are recurrent in the VLRs produced up to now, identified by a group of researchers on the left hand and in the recently published guide of UNDESA. And you can see that they are very similar. Usually there is an opening statement explaining the commitment of the mayor or of the city, some highlight and introduction. It should be explained also the methodology and the process of preparation of the review. Some elements on the policy and enabling environment, especially regarding the multi-level governments, and of course the core, which is the progress on goals and targets. In some cases only on goals, in some cases also on specific targets. In the UNDESA also suggests to include the means of implementation. There are very few VLRs that up to now included a specific chapter in the VLR, and of course the conclusion and next steps. So these are the example of the main structure of VLR. What we really focus on in the handbook is the indicator part. We provided examples of indicators for all the 17 SDG, even for the SDG 14, that in some cases has been addressed as the one that city cannot measure or should not be interested in measure. We actually find out that could be some cases in which this goal can be important. And the third part of the handbook recalls some examples and make some reflection more technical on the method of measurements of specific indicators. I will to leave the floor to my colleague Paula, who will go into the details of the second part, and I will jump in again at the end of her presentation to discuss a little bit the step forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alice. I hope you can hear me well and also see the presentation. Okay. Thank you for the introduction to previous speakers, and as all of you already understood from previous presentation, we are talking about the European Handbook, and as an instrument to support European cities willing to prepare their SDG voluntary local review. And in this presentation, we will go into more detail to try to understand which were the criteria we follow to select the indicator to propose to city, and also to get into some technical details of indicators, so to start a conversation with cities that will continue in an ad hoc workshop focusing on data and indicator. So this part corresponds to the part 2 of the handbook, in which we present a sort of ready-for-use tool for city official, researcher, and professional to prepare the data backbone of their VLR. Where we started acknowledging, talking with city, of course, and acknowledging which were the most recurrent challenges that they were observing. You can also confirm that that there are also other challenges, but among the most recurrent, we found insufficient financial resources to produce data over time, the lack of capacity or trained staff to collect, analyze, and disseminate data, and also a difficulty in harmonizing the use of indicators which can be compared across cities, and also indicators which can measure local issues. So we try to start from these 3 most recurrent challenges, and to start from there and to try to provide solution to you. How, for example, suggesting database which already provide indicators that cities can use and can integrate to the local indicator that they collect, and also in trying to provide a mix of both harmonized and non-harmonized indicators so that it can be inspirational for cities in create their own equilibrium, let's say. And finally, also trying to suggest indicators which are used locally from, for example, some cities, and then can be replicated, for example, from other cities. But we will see some example in a moment. So the rationale for the selection of indicators that we use, actually we started from the list of the UN Global Indicator Framework. Then we studied the Eurostat translation of the UN Global Indicator Framework for the context of Europe, which includes indicators which are suggested to countries to use to create their national voluntary review. And then we try to select among those indicators those that could be relevant for cities. Together with these indicators, we try to also find new ones, which could be locally relevant and not included in the list of reference for countries. So in the end, we came up with 4 typologies of indicators in the handbook, both official, which are those which follow the principle of official statistics, and experimental, so that are not maybe statistically perfect yet, but that can be useful as an experimental way, as an exploratory way to measure dimensions that had been neglected before. And we included, as I said before, both harmonized data that can help cities benchmark themselves against other cities, and non-harmonized, useful to target specific issues that some cities might have and some others might not. In the end, we also tried to include in the total number of indicators a balance between indicators measuring the social, the environmental, and economic dimension of sustainability. So we came up with 5 official, 26 experimental. 20 of them match either the EU or the UN or both set of indicators, while 51 are completely original. As for the source of the data we propose in the handbook, we have data and indicators which have been created and collected by European and international institutions like the JRC, Eurostat, DG Regio, but also the OECD and the European Environmental Agency, but also sources coming from national statistical offices, local administration themselves, NGOs, and universities. So the layout of the handbook is the following. So before we present every goal with its own page, which includes the description of the goal, its translation in the European context, and also its translation in the local dimension. And then we introduce a fiche for every indicator. Just to give you an example of how we sort of translate in the European context and in the local dimension every goal, you can find on the slide the goal 2, which is about zero hunger. In this case, as you all know, this goal is about moving beyond undernutrition and address challenges related to sustainable food production and consumption. In Europe, actually, what is important is not only to look at undernutrition, which is, of course, a relevant issue also now in this period of pandemic and of economic crisis, but also to look more broadly at malnutrition. So also to look at overweight people, obese people, which have quite a substantial impact on the health system of European countries, and also to look at the production of healthy and sustainable food. So what about the local dimension of this goal? As cities know better than us, of course, there are some phenomena which are easier to study at the local level, because a city might know better than a country level the number of homeless people, for example, which are a rare and elusive population, difficult to count. So they can understand which are the needs in terms of food provision that these people might need, and so can help and support financially, for example, NGOs providing and opening food kitchens for the homeless. Or a city might know better which is the portion of the elderly in its territory which might need food delivery at home, because they have nobody that can help them in this period of COVID crisis. So there are some dimensions which are purely local and need to be addressed. That's why we try to include indicators which could measure all these additional dimensions. So as I said before, after the presentation of its goal, there is a fish for every indicator useful to measure that goal. As you can see on the left-hand side of the fish, there are the main technical information on indicators. So you can see if it's an official or an experimental. In this case, it's an official indicator because in the icon for type, there is a sort of temple. Then, as it was mentioned before by our director, you can see all the goals for which a certain indicator can be used to measure, because there are clearly interlinkages among indicators. Then there is a part which is giving information on the alignment of the indicator we propose with the UN and the EU list. There is a coverage of the indicator as well as the aggregation for which it is available, in this case cities and greater cities, and the number of territorial units for which it is available and the source. Then there is a central part in which the indicator is defined. Then some trends of the indicator are proposed. For example, it can be described that the number of people at risk of income poverty after social transfers has been increasing or decreasing, which are the cities in which the number of people at risk is higher, which are the ones which is lower. And then you can also find a section on comments and limitations in which we explain a bit which is the use of indicators in the literature, and also which are the limitations in using a certain indicators that can be both technical but also thematic limitation. And then you have a section on metadata. So in the next slides, I will propose you some of the indicators we included in the handbook so that you can a bit understand which were the thoughts we used to select them. And we can also maybe in a next dedicated workshop discuss together about the utility of indicator we selected and also how to fine-tune the publication to be more useful to you, which is our goal. So in the slide, you can see, for example, the first indicator, which is the adolescent birth rate, which is the number of live births per women aged 10 from 10 to 19. Why we thought that this indicator would be useful to measure? Because, of course, adolescent childbearing is associated with a wide range of risk for young mothers and children, and it is also known from the literature that adolescent pregnancy might obstacle the socioeconomic development of girls because of the interruption of the education paths, for example. So this indicator is aligned with an indicator mentioned in the UN list, and it is available for 300 cities and greater cities, and it is provided by Eurostat. Why it is particularly interesting? Because this indicator is available at different levels, at the country level, at the regional level, at the municipal level. So cities can clearly use this indicator to understand which is their contribution towards the progress towards that goal in comparison to the progresses of the region that they belongs to and also of the country that they belongs to. In this case, just to show you a bit how to browse this database that we proposed, because this was considered to be a bit technical explanation. You can see that from the website that we included in the handbook, you can immediately see how your city, for example, the city of Porto, is behaving. You can also have a look at the trend. Using the time button, you can also extend the years for which an indicator is available, or clicking on cities, you can also benchmark your city with other cities. Another Example, which is not an indicator which is comparable across cities, but which is an indicator specific for Spain, and is the number of formal complaints for episodes of violence against women. Unfortunately, as I said, this indicator is not available across Europe at high disaggregation level like cities, but it's a good example to show, in our opinion. Why? Because also in this COVID crisis, countries and cities that were faring better in fighting the phenomenon of violence against women also were more resilient in this period of crisis in which people were obliged to stay at home. And so episodes of violence increased steadily. As you can see from the website, of course, there is always the link in the handbook. Other cities can take inspiration from the database that has been created by the Ministerio de Igualdad of Spain, because there are many indicators which can be used to monitor the phenomenon. There is the number of women which have been killed at home for episodes of violence against women. There is the number of denounces of violence to the police. So this is useful to understand that to measure this particular phenomenon, for example, it is useful to have in a city VLR different indicators referring to the phenomenon. Then we have another example, which is about the perception about the local labor market. This is useful because in our framework, we try not to include only crude indicators, so indicators on objective measures, but also indicators about perception, because sometimes they can be very relevant. For example, in this case, a pessimistic view of the labor market, it is known in the literature to lower the perceived bargaining power and the reservation wage of people. So monitoring this particular information, it could be particularly important. This indicator is not on cities, for example, to calculate. That might be difficult because it would imply creating a survey, running a survey, but it is already available from DG Regio for 83 cities. Also, looking at the website in which this database is available, if you click on the perception survey results, you might notice that in this website, you also have data on perception of several other indicators which may be of interest for cities. For example, the satisfaction about schools, the satisfaction about public transport, the satisfaction about healthcare. So these are all information which can be relevant for cities and are already calculated and comparable. Going to the next example. This is also an indicator which could be quite difficult to calculate for cities, but we provide this example because it is already available to use. This is the tree cover density. Why is it important? Because as it was mentioned by our director before, this could be a proxy of the biodiversity in cities, which is a topic particularly relevant in this moment. But this could also be an important element to counteract heat waves, which is also a phenomenon that it is increasing also in Europe. So thanks to this indicator, which is already available, as I said before, you can directly go on the website of Copernicus, for example, and you can zoom in the area which correspond to your city. Here we have, for example, Bilbao, but there are many cities included in this database, and you can download data directly from the websites. Going to our next example, in the handbook, we try to include indicators, as I said before, not only measuring the presence or the absence of a certain element, but also looking at the quality. Also, the quality is very important. So the indicator bathing sites with excellent water quality answer to this need of looking at the quality of things, and especially in this case, the quality of blue public spaces. This is also quite difficult to calculate because it implies the chemical analysis of, for example, river basins, inland sites, but it has been already calculated by the European Environmental Agency for 22,000 coastal beaches and inland sites. So also in this case, this indicator is aligned with another one mentioned in the EU list and can be directly downloaded. As an example, just to see how the indicators look like, we can see the example of Finland, for example, and we can look for the city of Turku that we have with us today. We can see that in the database there are 3 water sites, Inerkvalla, Ispionen, and Saroniemi. Sorry for the bad pronunciation. And you can see that there is both the localization of the water sites and also the quality, which could be good or sufficient, excellent, bad. See how the quality has changed over the years from 1995 to 2018. So this is very useful also to measure trends that we are going to talk in a second. So trying to conclude, for us, these are the most important criteria to take into consideration to create your own framework. The first one is to identify a clear city definition according to which going to measure all your indicators, because of course if you collect indicators at the municipal level or at the functional urban area level, you will have different results but also different margin of maneuver for your intervention. So you can also use 2 different city definitions, but you have to declare it and take it into account while you analyze data. It's very important also to have a baseline here and to try to, as I said before, collect and use indicators that you can observe over time, to look not only at the data at a certain point, but to see trends and also to see the distance to target. For example, now with the COVID, it is really important to see which were the progresses, for example, on unemployment that we were doing before, and how, as Wallis was mentioning before, how a system is resilient to the COVID crisis. So how the decrease in the number of employed people has been serious in some municipalities more than others, for example.
Paula, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
We're running a bit out of time, so can you please wrap up?
I'm concluding, yeah, in 1 minute. Sorry.
Thank you.
The last 2 points are, if you can, try to disaggregate data as much as possible, as it is required also by the UN, by age classes, sex, income, because you will be able to implement better your intervention and your policies. And finally, even if we are interested in understanding the data at the municipal level to act to improve a city performance, is better if it's possible to collect data at higher disaggregation level. So at census tracts, for example, or neighborhood, so that you can also implement better policies. So thank you very much. And sorry if I took a bit more time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paula, for also showing us the Eurostat database. I think it's very useful to get acquainted with the tool. Over to Alice for the last part of the presentation. Please, Mike.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me well and see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, I think the Paula's presentation really went into some technical details, but they are very relevant when we are talking about data, especially regarding the kind of analysis that then came out of the indicators. I would like to close this part of the training with some reflections and explain a little bit how we would like to move forward. Some reflection about the challenges in the VLR's process. Paula mentioned clearly the technical difficulties in identifying the indicators, but of course, the discussion we have with cities, with other stakeholders, with the cities organization, definitely some challenges emerge. They are related specifically into the dedicated resources for data collection and for the analysis, but also in the link between the national and or subnational level with the city level, and linked to that in the translation of national priorities or global priorities into the local context. One key aspect for the production of the VLRs can be also the legal framework, because it also changes from country to country. And in general, about the resilience of the process itself. What does it mean to collect data if in a period like this? So we should also keep in mind in the next VLRs, probably cities should also keep in mind, but this is something that I'm sure most of the participants have clear. What are the impacts also on the data collection and the bias on the data? What are we planning to do? We are following we will continue the work with the DG Region UN Habitat on specific technical topics like the city definition that Paola mentioned before. For example, how the new city definition that has been proposed to the UN Statistical Committee and approved, that is the degree of urbanization elaborated by DG Regio and the European Commission, that has been approved, how this will potentially impact the measurement of the SDGs. This is one key element that we would like to explore, but also we will continue to cooperate with external partners, participant to the discussion and the debate. In particular, we would like to focus the discussion with cities on three main topics that we identified. One is really the discussion about data and indicators. So as Paola today just give you a brief idea, there are many key elements regarding several SDGs that could be improved, that needs to be addressed. So we would like to have in-depth discussion on specific data collection at local level. The second one is about the project, how this measurement can actually, this indicator can actually measure the local transformative action. And the last one is about priorities, how this wealth of knowledge then translate into the identification of gap, new partnership, and new actions. One key element that we have been discussing in the last week internally, and I would like also to have your feedback on that, is the potential impact of COVID in the SDG cities performance and data collection. This is one element that we haven't yet explored in terms of research. And I would like to know from participants if you think that this could be relevant in the production of VLR and in general in the measurement of city performance. Regarding the refinement of the method, we will try to use all these occasion of meeting and discussion and debate to improve the method, to improve the handbook, to produce a second version by 2022. The goal for us is to launch the second edition at the next World Urban Forum that will be held in Katowice in Poland. We don't have a date fixed yet, published, announced. We hope it's not too early in the year, so we can have a little bit more of time to refine the method. What are the gaps that we identified? Some indicators might not be that relevant in the city view as we thought, for example. There could be indicators that we might replace. We can add new example of indicators. And of course, when I say example, it means also to validate and check the methodology for the measurement. Every indicator that is included now in the handbook has a scientific reference, has a methodology that has been published that can be replicated. So this is very important. We don't want only to say you have to measure addressed to a certain service if we don't explain in details how this can be done. Also, we will want to check the update and the delay in data collection. There are some new information that for sure we know that will come out in the next months. For example, the perception now, the DG Regio published the new Eurobarometer, so we might include new information and refine also the text and the link to the European dimension. One other two things that we would like to address are the possible link to other local monitoring systems, because we know that in most of the cases cities don't start from scratch. Of course, they have, for example, environmental strategies that are monitored through local systems. So we would like to see what is the link with this. And also another thing, as Wallis mentioned before, is the link to sustainable urban development strategies that has their monitoring indicators. And we would like to check the alignment with this and how this can be complemented and embedded. The last part is, of course, a reflection of the different methodologies of the VLR management method. If this is produced internally by the administration, or for example, by a researcher or external consultant, because this can also affect in a way the access to data and the data that are produced. So we are interested also in this part. The last but very important thing is that we are updating the urban data platform to include the indicators in the handbook, but we could also use this platform. If you don't know it, I invite you to look at it, to include your indicators of the city through API system, to use this platform for you to showcase your data. This is a very important part of the project. We think that this platform can be very powerful, and with the SDG framework, you can really customize the page to use it for your own scope. With that one, I close the presentation. I thank you very much for your attention. I know he has been very technical, but we are open for questions. I've read one already now, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alice, for this presentation and also a view on the way forward. And as we heard, the JRC is really looking for feedback from the cities on the handbook and on the indicators proposed. We have one question from Masha from Eurocities already, but I would first like to ask if there are comments or questions directly from the cities. If so, please raise the hand. Do you see the symbol with the hand on your screen?
Maybe I can try to answer to this one meanwhile.
Hold on, you want to answer Masha's question?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Masha, can you maybe ask your question so that everybody hears it?
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. So just based on the work that we have done with cities and looking at how they implement transformative policies, we see that certain indicators are a big challenge. Even if cities do a lot on the issue of sustainable production and consumption, be it sustainable procurement, sustainable value chains, fair trade, we don't know what is the baseline where they actually try to do more or enact transformative policies. And this is due to the fact that the flows of goods, of carbon-intensive goods, food that is being imported are difficult to measure. And the only example that we found, and where a certain number of scientific publications have already been made, is the example of Portuguese cities. 6 small Portuguese municipalities that have teamed up with a global footprint network and also have recently applied this methodology to a sustainable food transition in Portugal. That's the publication that came out in August 2020. So my question is, looking at the challenge, and this is extremely important as part of the Green Deal and the circular economy, and not least due to the fact that maybe we should try to find the causal change of sustainable production and consumptions by looking how the indicator is maybe distributed according certain income groups. So to actually have a link of with the inequality and SDG 10. So my question is, like, looking at these challenges, what are your plans in developing perhaps this specific indicator, and how you take into account certain advances in scientific research and actions that are being already carried on today?
Yeah. Thank you, Masha, for this question. I think it's very relevant. And actually, I have to admit that SDG 12 was one of the most challenging to address in the handbook, of course, there are others, but this one has been very challenging because, as you say, there is no well-established methodology for the local footprint, and there are still ongoing the development of local indicators. One thing that I could say is that we have been consulting the expert in the JRC. We have a whole unit working specifically on that. In the handbook, we included one box of consumer footprint in city exactly to explain this point. We know that our colleague at the beginning of the year, they were testing this consumer footprint tool that should address specifically that. It's still under development. This is one of the points that we wanted to improve, to check with them in the next months how this test and validation has been performed. But it's basically, it should imply it is a tool that in which the city could insert some key indicators to make the calculation of the footprint. This is one point that definitely we can discuss more in detail. Also inviting this unit of the JRC and eventually other experts to discuss it specifically. But this is one of the key gaps that we identify. And you spot it.
Yeah. Oh, on that note, you're welcome to get in touch if we can already contribute with some of the city experience measuring the footprint in certain goods in certain areas. So we are happy to contribute to that.
Thank you very much.
We have another question from Jules de Winter. Jules, can you take the floor directly? You can unmute yourself. And can you please present yourself saying which city you come from? Thank you. Can the others please mute themselves?
Hi everybody. Thank you for the excellent presentations. My name is Jules. I work for the Flemish Association of Municipalities, and we are also working on the localization of the SDGs. And some of the issues that we encounter when we're talking with cities that want to monitor and report on the SDGs is, well, there are some cities that do report on the SDGs, but that kind of use the SDGs for greenwashing, cherry picking. So they pick the indicators they are doing good on, they're performing well, and then they only present the results for these indicators. So how can you avoid this type of cherry picking slash greenwashing? That's the first question. Another question, which is related to the first one, is how can you overcome resistance by the political level for monitoring and reporting on the SDGs? Because many times the politicians of cities and municipalities, they tell us, well, many of these indicators, for example, on local unemployment, poverty, etc., we have very little influence on these indicators and on these issues, which is mostly related to national and higher level of politics. So that's their argument for saying, well, we don't have any influence on it, so why should we report on it? And the third question is, are there any indicators related to internal management issues, for example, sustainable procurement, ethical banking, good governance, etc.? Thank you.
Annika, maybe I can reply.
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
So you did very interesting questions. So we need this question and we need to discuss all these points together because they are clearly crucial. As for your first question about cherry picking, I would say that since we are working on 17 goals, and so we also have goal 16, which is about inclusion and participation. One point to avoid cherry picking is to do a sort of participative SDGs local voluntary review. There are some cities, also Reggio Emilia, if I'm not wrong, has a sort of participatory process in the elaboration of its VLR, so that also people can clearly indicate which are the points which are more crucial to them, so that the city is then sort of stimulated to include them in the VLR. And this also helps the city to be accountable, which is a sort of a first reply to your question about internal management issues. Because having to be more accountable sometimes also improves your internal management. For example, also on Goal 16, we included the case of Italy, which created a database which is public and which includes all the information about all procurement procedures which are issued by local authorities, regional authorities. So through that website, you can see how many organizations participate to every call, which is the criteria that they were using to select the winner, all the technical details. So this is also something, being accountable can be useful for improving internally. And last but not least, about the impact, how to overcome political resistance in monitoring topics on which municipalities might have little influence. Actually, you did the example of homeless, but for example, really regarding homeless, there are some countries which created some national census of homeless people, for example, but they have very, let's say, fuzzy result because it's a rare and elusive population, so it's very difficult to monitor. But there are also some cities around Europe which were the first to propose to do like local censuses to understand which were the problem of the territory, because these are clearly, local poverty is really an issue, no? Because it's connected with segregation, it's connected with it has many local consequences. So cities in reality also on that can have a margin of maneuver, no? In monitoring and in also transmitting the information at higher levels, especially on these phenomena which are difficult to map. So this would be my feedback, but of course we can continue to discuss.
I would like to build on top of what Paula say, to avoid the cherry picking and the political, overcome the political resistance. One of the goal of the handbook was also to provide some backbones indicators that are already available, harmonized, collected by European institution or by other institutions. So these are really some indicators that we will encourage every city to use. They are already there. So already this, and also showing that these data are available for every goal. Some of them, it really also should call cities to try to be more transparent and also to encourage them to use them. So from our side, of course, these are voluntary local reviews. They are voluntary. We cannot impose any method. What we can do is providing tools, suggestions, methodology on how to make it comparable, reliable, and scientifically sound. Regarding the management issue, the internal part, one thing we have been discussing about it when we were designing the handbook, if we should include, for example, budget monitoring, expenditure on specific chapters, but I have to admit that it will be very hard to compare this among Europe. To provide indicators that you can use in Greece and in France, or so we decided to stay out of this, let's say, analysis for this specific one. But thank you, it's very interesting.
Thank you, Paula and Alice. We have a question from Pedro Pombeiro, I think from the city of Porto. Pedro, the floor is yours. You can unmute yourself, please.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but we would like to know what will be the timeline to feed and to present these indicators.
Yeah, our goal, as I said, is to refine the methodology by end of 2021. So we have, let's say, 1 year ahead to refine Of course, this will not be done only at the end of the year. It will be a step-by-step process, and probably with a lot of refinement back. So I would say that for the analysis of the VLR, we aim at the next round of July 2021, what many cities we know will publish VLR and present it at the next HLPF. For the analysis of VLR as such, for indicators, I would say fall 2021. For us then to have time to produce the handbook, to write it down, to double check, to also have more reviewers from cities on the text itself. So this is the time frame.
Okay. But what will be the next steps for cities?
Yeah, in November and December, we will call you in smaller groups to have in-depth discussion on specific parts, on specific goals or specific indicators till next spring. And then we will in a way stop this consultation on specific arguments unless some other specific needs rise up. But we will like to continue, let's say, to follow also the cities that we know they are working on VLRs already.
Okay, so
till fall 2021.
Okay, let me just make a suggestion for us. One of our major difficulties is gathering and involving, engaging all different departments within our municipality and also outside. So it would be interesting to these joining cities to share their experience of how. I'm sure the reality is quite different, but it would be interesting for us to share some experience on how we are going to organize internal task force to gather all this data.
Yeah,
it's just messages.
Yeah, I know that today we have here also colleagues from CMR and from other European city networks. I know for sure that there are already some moments in which some events that they organize, but one thing that probably that I mentioned about how to identify the gaps, one of the topic could be that one. And one future meeting will be specifically on that. And we will also call some experts from local authorities that will bring you some suggestions. So this is something that we already had in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point that Pedro brought forward, because the process and the participation of the city departments, but also the citizens and the civil society is a key part of the VLR. We have a question from Reggio Emilia on the articulation of the SDG goals and the indicators. Aldo, you
Annika, maybe we can have 2 or 3 questions, and
okay.
Then so we try to.
I think anyway we need to limit ourselves maybe to 3 questions and then wrap up.
No, I'm happy to stay as long as you want, but maybe.
So maybe a question from Aldo and then from Jutta. Aldo Treville, are you here? Can you unmute yourself? Maybe we can take Jutta Mäkinen then. Jutta, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, hello. Greetings from Finland, from Turku. My question was about, I know that you did this when describing its goal, that it was taken to the European context and also on the local level, but did you assess all the targets as well? Because I know that some cities have done this, and we actually did in our first VLR report as well. So we assessed maybe some of the targets that were not applicable to local level. Did you take this in your handbook into assessment?
We have been discussing this extensively. At the end, we decided to go only for the target, for the goal, and not for the targets. Some targets impossible to be translated at the local level. In some cases, there is no competence of local governments on that. So that's why we decided to exclude it. Of course, it would be interesting for the second version of the handbook to highlight specifically. We only put in the text if the indicator is specifically linked to one target, but we didn't assess all the target as a whole.
Thank you.
But it could be interesting for the second version, definitely, to try to improve this part. Thanks.
I think we can wrap up now because the first people already have to leave. So in conclusion, I would like to thank all the speakers and in particular all the participants for being there and for your interest and your contributions. We have recorded the session because we have received the request from several cities who were not free this morning. And we will also share a link with the presentations by Alice and by Paula. If you have any questions, you have my contact, you have Alice's contact. I think we are looking forward to hearing from you.
Yeah.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Annika.
Thanks to all. Yeah, sorry, Aldo, that the sound didn't work. That's a pity. Please send us an email. Goodbye, everyone. I'm going to close the meeting.